Good morning. This is Dylan Bauscher here with Happs News. We are live in San Francisco this morning for the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March. Today's event in San Francisco is one of 900 actions taking place in 95 countries. To tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm here, I'm from Miami, Florida originally. And if you've been following the news out of Florida, you probably have seen some pictures of dead fish washing ashore in a red tide crisis that scientists are still researching to find out whether human activity is making it worse or not. So that's why I'm here today, but there are hundreds of people out here today and dozens of organizations. And I have to say, of the protests I've covered in 7 years of freelance journalism for the LA Times and Chicago Tribune, I think today's event is particularly festive. And one thing I'll be highlighting throughout this stream is the intense creativity that has gone into a lot of the pieces that the protesters and marchers are carrying with them today. We'll talk to another artist who is from Miami, Florida. She brought wind-activated turbines for protesters to hold and 50 solar panels with political messages on them. And that's just one example we'll get to later on in the stream. A little bit of background on this event. This event is coming 4 days before something that's coming up in California that's also taking place in San Francisco that's called the Global Climate Action Summit. And I think one of the main goals of this event is to convince California Governor Jerry Brown to divest California's state pensions from any fossil fuel companies or organizations. And for context on that, there are several states considering similar measures. New York is one of them. And so this is a focal point for climate activists right now. In California, you should know the state has the two largest public pension funds in the US, and they make up $500 billion in assets. When it comes to the state's fossil fuel investments in those $500 billion pension funds, that's about $300 million that is currently invested in coal companies and fossil fuel. Today's event, which is put on by an environmental advocacy group called 350, is really about focusing on getting the state to divest from coal first and then all fossil fuel in those pension funds, those $300 million worth of assets in those pension funds. This is the latest battlefront in the climate change fight in this country. For some more background on this, it's worth remembering, and you may recall yourself, that in June of last year, President Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement. And almost immediately, California joined New York and 14 other states, including Puerto Rico, in saying, we are not going to be a part of that withdrawal. We will maintain our commitment. We will follow through and uphold our end of this deal in the Paris Climate Accord from 2015, Paris Climate Accord from 2015, excuse me. And when Trump withdrew, it's worth noting that even though he announced the U.S. is, on its way out of this agreement and we won't be holding to it, not only have the 16 states plus Puerto Rico said that's not happening, there's an article in the Paris Climate Agreement, it's Article 28, that says the U.S. technically won't be withdrawing before November 4th, 2020. Now, that's an important date to mark in your calendar because it's one day after the next presidential election. So there is still time to stop the withdrawal altogether. But today's event is focused on those $300 million in California state pensions that are invested in coal and fossil fuel companies. Now, the 16 states in Puerto Rico that have said we're not going to be stepping out of this deal, they are part of the U.S. Climate Alliance. In 4 days here, we've got that Global Climate Summit. They're going to be focusing on 5 focal points. One of them is going to be healthy energy. The second one is going to be inclusive economic growth. The third is going to be sustainable communities. The fourth is going to be land and ocean stewardship. And the fifth is going to be climate investment. And the reason why we're here today is because this Global Climate Action Summit coming up in 4 days is also happening in San Francisco. So we are, right here at ground zero where the difference is getting made, not just by protesters who are here today, but by governors and mayors and local and state officials who will be participating and have been invited, if they aren't participating, in this global climate action summit in 4 days here. Now, I'm going to flip my camera here and just start walking us through this crowd at the Embarcadero Plaza in San Francisco and just go through, show you some of the art and let you see for yourself what I'm talking about. So we've got this massive banner up here, the We Rise for Our Future. And this is all in front of the Valencourt Fountain, which is spewing green water today. And over to my right, I'm going to pull up this image of this cow, this inflatable cow. And so as you can see, dozens of groups, lots of variety in the art. So I'm just going to get a little quiet here and walk through this for you. Bring you here with me. We want you to experience this with us. If you have questions, feel free to ask them. We'll try to get you some answers. Now the march is kicking off now, technically at 11, and you can see, I'll show you, these people are starting to move, and this march is going to be 1.5 miles from where we are at the Embarcadero Plaza to the Civic Center. And they're starting now after a moment of solidarity, where they said 5 times, remember, remember, remember. Go through it one time. When y'all join us, sing it from your heart, from your soul, for everything you love. Don't worry about sounding good. Just sing it like you mean it.
Move your bodies. Use your body.
Here we have some people getting the crowd riled up, ready to start the march.
Rising with the mountaintops, flowing with the oceans. We are the protectors, our spirits have awoken. We are the protectors. We are the protectors. Rising with the mountaintops, flowing with the ocean. We are the protectors, our spirits have awoken. We are the protectors. We are the protectors. Rising with the mountaintops, flowing with the ocean. We are the protectors, our spirits have awoken. We are the protectors. We are the protectors. Rising with the mountaintops, flowing with the ocean. We are the protectors, our spirits have awoken. We are the protectors. We are the protectors. Rising with the mountaintops, flowing with the ocean. We are the protectors, our spirits have awoken. We are the protectors. We are the protectors. Rising with the mountaintops, flowing with the ocean. We are the protectors, our spirits have awoken.
Now, as you can see, there are thousands of people here today, possibly tens of thousands. They are filling the Embarcadero Street and Market Street, where this march will be proceeding.
The protectors, our spirits have awoken. We are the protectors.
And that's where we're heading next. We're going to move from Embarcadero Plaza now over to Market Street. move through the crowd as we go.
Excuse me, this is a bit area for disabilities.
And so right now, if you couldn't hear, or if you're maybe just joining us, they were chanting a song, "We Are the Protectors." And I'm estimating thousands, if not tens of thousands, of protectors here today at this march. I'm going to keep moving through this crowd here to highlight this art. We're not going to be able to cover all of it, but it is all beautiful. There are parachutes on the ground we will go to later on as well. And up here, you might be able to see some of those wind turbines and solar panel protest signs I brought up earlier. This group who is marching, we're going to go right into the crowd with them. This group is led by an artist named Alessandra Mondolfi, who is from Miami, Florida. Mondolfi makes these signs herself. She does this regularly for protests. All of her art is thematic. Usually it is consistent and it aligns with whatever the action is. And so we'll just go and highlight some of these messages on here. This one might be hard to read. It says, "Rise up for a fossil fuel-free world." And then right next to her, you've got the wind-powered turbines. It's not a particularly windy day, but that's okay. It is still beautiful out there. And besides the solar panels and wind turbines, some of the women are also sporting earrings that say, "Our future is renewable." And here's Alessandra getting the crew ready. And this is just another example of some of that beautiful art I was mentioning earlier. Now in front of us, what I'm showing you is Market. Market Street is packed. There's barely room to move. The marchers are sardines in a tin can. And movement has not quite started yet on its way to the Civic Center, but it's getting there.
Works a lot in Michigan or New York and Chicago. Also adopting
Now this might be the largest march I have been to since at least the Women's March in Los Angeles of 2017. That was massive. We're going to move over here. You can see the various organizations. We've got a labor group here with a massive yellow banner. And we're still making our way through the crowd here. And if you're just joining us, we are here at the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March in San Francisco. I'm Dylan Bauscher. We're with Happs News. And there are thousands of people here today. It's a particularly light, bright, festive march. It's a beautiful day to be rallying to protect the environment. And honestly, there's been a lot of unity. I've seen a lot of groups, strangers willing to communicate in ways that I don't see typically at protests in other parts of the country, and especially at smaller protests. There's it's almost paradoxical the way that a larger group like this can kind of foster more intimacy among strangers than maybe smaller protests might. So we're just going to go back to highlighting some of the art and people who are here today. And if you have questions, feel free, drop them in the chat. We will find answers for them. Now, besides some of the focal points I brought up earlier about divesting the state's two largest pension funds from $300 million worth of coal and fossil fuel investments, another focal point that the organizers seem to be rallying around today is banning fracking in the state of California. And you can see this sign, which kind of highlights that. Hi, I'm here live streaming with Happs News today. Would you be willing to answer some questions about why you're here today? No? Thank you. Well, lovely sign.
What sign? Well, maybe that's her union. The IFPTE.
Hi, I'm here live streaming with Happs News today. Could I ask you guys some questions about why you're out here?
We're just out here to make our point, to add to the numbers. Okay.
What do you think? What do you make of California's climate situation? California is a leader in climate action.
Oh, well, I'm proud to live in California. You know, the fact that at least we're trying to do the right thing, while there's other states that are working in the opposite direction.
Yeah, there are 16 at least that kind of agree with California. 16 states that have joined that climate alliance. Yeah, it's a beautiful day to be rallying to kind of protect the environment, huh?
Oh yeah, no, this is great. I'm just happy to see all these people. You know.
And can you talk to me about your sign?
Well, somebody gave it to me. I mean, we're pushing that. You know, we have in our county we have 100% option for electricity. But I just got this because somebody makes up extras and they were passing them out. So I believe in it.
Yeah, and California has $300 million invested in coal and fossil fuel in those state pension funds. And what do you think of that?
Oh, they got to get out of it. Carbon energy is a big bubble. It's all going to, financially it's going to fall apart. Besides morally, we shouldn't be investing in it.
And we're starting to march now. Could you tell us where we're marching to?
Well, we're marching down to Civic Centers. I mean, as far as I know.
And is this your first protest? Have you been out here before?
No, I was here for a pipeline protest a couple of years back. I've been to a few.
Yeah. Do you think the environment is maybe more important to protest for than other causes? Or?
Probably is. Yeah, it has the longest significance, I think, into the future. Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell people today about this event?
No, I'm good.
Thank you very much. And so we just spoke to a protester who kind of shared his sentiments on why he came out and why the environment is, maybe arguably more important to be protesting for than some other causes. Not that they should be compared, but I had to ask. We're starting to march. We're starting to move here. If you can see it behind me, the group is moving up Market Street. I'm going to flip the camera back around. You can see some of these volunteers working diligently to keep people organized as movement begins. And I'm walking us back now over to where Miss Mundolfi is with the solar panels and wind turbines. You can already see that labor group I shot earlier and showed you has now turned the corner and they're proceeding up Mission Street. Over here it looks like this might be paper mache head of Governor Jerry Brown. And people of all walks of life are here today, people of all ages.
We want Jerry Brown has submitted over 20,000 oil and gas drilling permits in his administration. We want Jerry Brown to stop jerry rigging our climate, and stop the drilling, stop the fracking. That's why we're here.
Just fantastic. It's Jerry Brown's paper mache head on oil rig bobbing up and down, and this group is starting to move themselves. Their mantra is Jerry, don't jerry rig our climate. This is the Green Party of California.
Get past.
Hi, I'm with Happs News. Could I ask you some questions? Happs News.
Okay,
What's going on here today? Why are you out here?
I'm out here to fight for the planet. I'm tired of it. The state is burning. We can't wait anymore. We have to do something. There's a big conference next week, this coming week, and we want those people to know people care. The working people care.
As you can see, lots of older folks participating today. Some articles recently have maybe highlighted children and teenage efforts in court battles to sue the government over climate change and its inaction on climate change, the federal government. Equally relevant to senior citizens who young people share this planet with. They are out in full force today. And we'll be hearing more of them too. Just going to keep moving us through this crowd here. The sign says a just and stable climate can never be left to the market. As much as this is an environmental march today, the people are particularly focused on following the money behind climate deniers
No more coal. No more coal.
Presently, we are at the intersection of Stewart and Mission. This is where people decided to meet today for the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March. As you can see, they are starting to move. You can see this volunteer in front of us, ensuring they move in the right direction. We have educators here, the United Educators of San Francisco, who are with us today. Hi, I'm with Happs News. Would you mind? I'm with Happs News today, streaming this event.
Sure.
Could you talk about why you're here?
Yeah, I've been a teacher and a union activist for many, many years, and I just retired. I want the students that I taught at the New School to have a long, healthy life with climate change under control. Um, my students always learned about the conditions of people in the other parts of the world, and we know that people in poorer nations are already suffering the impact of climate change. That's why I'm here to do my part in changing it, standing up to the Trump administration and the corporate criminals who have profit more importantly.
And California has two state pension funds with $300 million worth of investments in coal and fossil fuel organizations.
Yeah, I think we should divest, and United Educators of San Francisco are down with that. There's other ways to fund our pension. And pension is necessary because teachers gotta have a nice sunset after long careers, but not by the wrong kind of dirty money.
Anything else you'd like to add today?
I'm just really glad to be here. The big turnout. UESF always shows up.
Yeah, how's the weather? It's a beautiful day to be
It's a
fighting to protect the
beautiful day.
environment.
Got my colleague Mark, teaches at Lincoln High School.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Thank you. Where do we find this?
Happs News, Happs.
Okay.
Very serious about it.
All right. Now, I'm going to turn the camera back to myself and just set the scene one more time for anybody just joining. We are here at the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March in San Francisco along the Embarcadero, which is right along the bay. It's a beautiful day here, and there are thousands, maybe tens of thousands of protesters out here today. As one just told me a minute ago, San Francisco shows up. And now we are moving with the crowd north on Mission Street. Actually, I don't know that we're moving north, but we are moving. And we have a mile and a half to go about until we get to the Civic Center. I'm going to turn back and keep highlighting the people who are here with us. This banner here says, "Jobs with Justice." Earlier today, I mentioned that there are 16 states that have formed a U.S. climate alliance, including Puerto Rico. 16 states in Puerto Rico that are part of that climate alliance to reject Donald Trump's withdrawal of the United States from the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. And now those 16 states, to tie it back to that Jobs with Justice banner that we saw in that crowd and we are now losing in the sea of people. That climate alliance claims to represent 1.3 million jobs and up to $9 trillion of GDP. Now, Jobs with Justice to the U.S. Climate Alliance, those 1.3 million jobs, those clean energy jobs, are jobs with justice, and to them, those are jobs that are focused on environmental renewable energy and energy efficiency. And here we are in front of some labor organizations. And they're chanting, what do we want? Climate justice. When do we want it? Now. More beautiful art here as the chanting and the marching continues.
What do we want? What do we want? What do we want? What do we want?
Now, this is the California Faculty Association, another group of educators who is out here today. We spoke to one educator earlier who acknowledged the education pension funds in the state do have, as I reported, $300 million worth of investments in coal and fossil fuel organizations. That one teacher we spoke to earlier was against that. He wants clean money and clean energy in his pension fund investments. This sign here for my grandkids. Hi, I'm with Happs News. Would you mind answering some questions about why you're out here today?
Sure.
All right. Tell me about your sign.
Well, one of the reasons I'm here is because I want there to be a habitable planet for my three grandchildren. But even more important, I want to be a habitable planet for all the other grandchildren, for the millions of grandchildren. And even more important than that, a habitable planet for all the millions of species other than human beings that we're destroying.
And what else would you like to say today? Is this your first protest?
No, this is about my 5,432nd protest. I think my first protest was probably, my first protest would have been one of several I went to against the Vietnam War. And then I did a lot of protests involved with the United Farm Workers Union. And one thing led to another, and I go to protest.
And how's the vibe at this protest today?
How did what?
How's the vibe? What's it feel
It's
like?
very positive. It's fun. It's hopeful. Hopeful in the face of there realistically not being much hope, but there's some, and we got to make the most of it.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. When union jobs are under attack, what do we do? What do we do?
And we're just moving through the crowd here. The police presence here today, I have to say, has been fairly measured. They have, from what I've observed, focused primarily on keeping people where they should be for the march and through the march. I'm going to flip this camera back around here and start highlighting the next group. Now we're about halfway up Mission Street, and her sign says climate change is a capitalist creation. You want to? I'm with Happs News, streaming live right now. Would you mind talking about what your sign means?
Absolutely. So, basically, because of how capitalism like dictates resource use and the way that capitalist thinking kind of encourages over exploitation of resources, that is how we got climate change, by not disinvesting from fossil fuels when we had the chance about 30, 40 years ago, by making decisions that continually reinforce the use of fossil fuels and the changing of our climate. That is capitalist decision. That is a capitalist logic that is used to justify it. And the only way that we can really take meaningful climate action is to disinvest from capitalism and change our system so that we're no longer using resources in such a way.
And how's the feeling out here today? Is this your first protest? How does this one
So,
stack up?
I've been to a few different protests, both like here in the Bay Area. I went to the Berkeley Rise Up Against Hate rally, as well as like back in Detroit, a demonstration at the local ICE facility. I'm from Detroit, so that's right. Yeah, this is awesome. It's a really good feeling. A lot of different groups all united to just stand for the same thing, which is climate justice and sustainable and good planet to live on.
And the police presence here today.
I haven't seen too many cops, which is good. We should not invite cops to protests.
Yeah.
So that's where I stand.
And while we're marching for the climate, could you talk a little bit about the weather here today?
Yeah, it's nice, good moderate temperature out, and not too warm. It's nice to be in the sun. Yeah, it's nice.
And is there anything else you'd like to say about capitalism and climate change and divesting?
Well, yeah, definitely. We need to stop thinking about environmentalism as individual choices, or as something, or as choices that we can make from the current system. Because what we need is a radical restructuring of society, which means a different economic system and a different social living environment, as well as just different ways that we use resources and an end to consumerist culture. That is the only way that we can achieve that. And so, I don't know, if you currently think about environmentalism as individual choices people need to make, or policies or laws that need to be passed, definitely you need to start reforming your thinking.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm streaming with Happs News. I'm streaming with Happs News.
Oh, cool.
Could you talk to me about your sign?
Oh, this is a sign. I came up with this sign after 9/11, and I made caution tape out of old fax paper, literally painted it and stenciled on, government out of order, tried to wrap the Santa Rosa Federal building with it one night with my kids and my husband. But the security people freaked out and came running out and said, "You're terrorists! You're terrorists!" And we were like, "No, we're demonstrating and we're actually on public property." But they came out like marathon runners and ran through the tape. But ever since then, I keep recreating the sign, and then it gets left in a demonstration, and I make a new one. But government is out of order, and it's been out of order for a long time.
And so that's a broad message that you've applied to several protests now.
Yes,
But
and different administrations.
what are you trying to say with it today about the government's action or inaction on climate?
Well, I mean, me personally, I would like to see us have a democratic socialist government. I would like to see people have the things they need, like clean water and good food and clean land and great education. And I'm disabled, so I have Medicare, but I think everybody should have the kind of health care I have, because everybody deserves health care and housing and education.
I've noticed, a lot of news articles tend to focus on the kids who seem to be rising up about climate inaction by the government, maybe suing the federal government in court, battling them in court. But I've noticed a lot of elders here today who are standing with them and marching with them. It seems like one of them said San Francisco really shows up.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about
Well,
that?
I think I started doing my first environmental activism during Redwood Summer, which was 24, 25 years ago. And I got arrested at the first demonstration in Redwood Summer in front of a logging truck. children and my grandchildren. And, you know, I know that saying only God can make trees kind of, not a real religious person, but, the trees are the lungs of our planet. And if we don't take care of balance of the natural world, we're going to die. So it's not just being an environmentalist, it's being a survivalist. And I hope we'll all survive.
Thank you. We are moving right along here. As you can see, I'm going to flip the camera back over to me. And if you are just joining us, I'm going to reset the scene for you. I am Dylan Boucher. We are here with Happs News at the Rise for Climate, Just Jobs and Justice March. We are moving up Market Street now, on our way to the Civic Center. A beautiful day to be out here protesting. Everybody is commenting on how much fun they're having. I myself am having a blast, I've got to say. Definitely one of the most pleasant and straightforward protests I've ever been to. Extremely coordinated. I'm going to turn the camera over now, though, to these two. His sign says, "Join the revolution." And Trump equals traitor, resist. Now these two are not only standing out, they are standing above, not marching with the rest, as you can see. Now somebody here mentioned earlier that this is not just about young people, this is not just about old people, this is about all species. And they are also here marching today. Lots of dogs here today. And we have a question from Danny Malk 82, and now some comments. Danny asks, "You think government can do anything?" For those of you who are just joining us, it's worth reminding everybody here that a focus of today's Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March is to convince Governor Jerry Brown to support a bill that is known as SB 185 that has made its way past and been approved by a committee in California's State Assembly. SB 185 would divest $300 million of the state's $500 billion total pension funds and divest those $300 million that are currently invested in coal and fossil fuel companies. So, Mr. Danny Malk, when he asks, can government do anything? There's your answer. Yes, it can divest. In California, the state divests $300 million from coal and climate. And we have heard from coal and fossil fuel corporations. We have actually heard from teachers who draw from those pensions or will in the future when they retire, who are here today and who support divesting from those pensions, those pensions from coal and fossil fuel corporations. And anybody else, if you have questions, we will find answers. Drop them in the chat. Going to turn the cam back around now. We are moving right along, still moving up Market Street. And we've got this group in front of us, and I'm going to turn the camera around here. You can see a bit of a gap in the crowd. Yeah, somebody just commented, less cars in the street, more bikes. I have absolutely noticed that today. There are a ton of bicyclists. And for those who were asking about police presence earlier, you can see tepid. focused for the most part on controlling motion, movement of the crowd. Crowd control. You can see these volunteers working diligently to do the same. One more bike on the street today, just as we were mentioning earlier. Hi, I'm with Happs News.
Oh, what's up, man?
It's are you part of the march today?
Yeah, you can say that. I don't pertain to a specific organization, but just out here trying to get heard.
Were you planning on joining the march today? Or did
I
you just
heard about it a few days ago, and I was like, yeah, man, I need to be there.
Yeah?
Yeah, got the family out here. We need to make our voices heard. Bullshit going on. We need to be out here.
Awesome.
Real, man. Get out here.
Thank you.
Are you aware that these are plays on former signs from the 60s?
I do not. Please talk to me about your signs.
Buildings used to say, make peace, not war. Now it says that. Mine used to say, war is not healthy for the children and not for the new message.
All right. Thank you. We are moving right along. The group has stopped, as you can see. They're still moving up Mission Market. Excuse me. And this group is the National Nurses United. And they're all calling for climate action now. One more cyclist in the crowd. The name of the march, for those who are just joining us, is the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March. Excuse me. Hi, I'm with Happs News. Would you mind answering Happs News?
Happs News, okay.
Yeah, could I ask you what you're doing here today? Why you decided to join?
I joined because I feel like, science is being ignored, that we have a serious problem with our climate and with the earth. And if I don't come out and do something, no one's going to listen. So it's important for us to be out here.
And I noticed you have a bike today.
Yes.
Yeah. And what about this march? How does this compare to other protests or actions that you've been a part of?
I mean, I think it's one that's accessible to everyone, that anybody can come out of their house and be a part of and understand that the environment affects all of us, and it's important for us to be active in protecting it. And I rode my bike because what a better march to ride your bike to, right? Not drive your car and ride your bike. Makes sense.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to say about why you're out here today?
No, I'm good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving through the crowd here. Lots of engineer groups here today. For those just joining, Dylan Bauscher with Happs News at the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March, which is briefly paused en route to the Civic Center. I'm going to turn this back around. And we're going to catch up to the rest of the crowd here. There's the Don't Jerry Rig Our Climate art again. Now, this banner says queer revolution to save the planet. And down at the bottom, hashtag no DAPL, a reference to the Dakota Access Pipeline that was blocked by the Obama administration and then approved by the Trump administration.
Yeah, well, I'm pushing the stop contributing angle every chance I get. Sure, you're not getting anybody.
I did a good job. Nice.
Third.
I love that sign. That sign says the climate is changing. Why aren't we? Hi, I'm streaming with Happs News. Could I ask you some questions about the sign? What? Granddaughter made it. Hi. How'd you come up with that message?
It's a little just brainstorming.
Is this your first protest?
No, definitely not.
No?
Yeah.
What's it feel like to be out here today?
I really like it. A lot of people coming together for the same cause, trying to make a difference.
Are you proud? And another great sign, Happs News.
What's that?
Some startup. They're doing some interesting stuff on Twitter and Periscope. You can see it, HAPPS. This other sign, equally compelling. It says, dump Trump, the shithole president. So was this a team effort, this one? Talk to me about this one. Talk to me about this sign.
Artistic flair in there too.
Well, you heard it from them. They said they're throwing President Trump's words back at him, a reference to when he referred to several countries as shithole nations. And on the back of this sign, sharks are awesome. Protect the sacred. And that says, not a penny more for dirty energy. Hi, I'm streaming with Happs News, and I'm wondering if I could ask you about that sign.
I don't think it's the best person to take photo, but thank you.
Okay, what about you? With your sign? It says abolish pipelines, prisons, and police. That's a lot of issues wrapped up in one.
They're related. About making profits before too.
You heard it. It's about putting profits before people. Thank you. We're going to keep moving through the crowd here. Everywhere we go, people want to know. People want to know who we are. So we tell them. We are the red Mark in the Periscope chat is asking what happened to my city. Well, Mark, it looks like there are thousands of people out here today participating in the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March in your city in San Francisco. And for anybody just joining us, it's worth reminding viewers, this is one of 900 actions in 95 countries. This action is still moving up Market Street on its way to the Civic Center in San Francisco, pausing briefly as police corral the thousands of people who are protesting. And if you're just joining us, going to reset this scene for us. Dylan Bauscher with Happs News at the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March in San Francisco. It's a beautiful day to be out here. It really is. I'm going to show us, though. I'm going to flip this camera here and catch up with this group. The Weed Nuns. Hello. I'm with Happs News, streaming right now. Who are the Weed Nuns?
We're Sisters of the Valley. We live in a farm and we grow cannabis and we heal people of their ills through our cannabis medicines. And we work to support our activists. We're activist nuns. We're not affiliated with the Catholic Church or any man-made religion. We're a women-owned, women-run business. And we do it all in a spiritual environment.
And why are you out here today rallying for the climate?
Because 60 species a day are going extinct. And we are in the dark night of the globe. And we have to change our habits. And we have to start by replacing our plastics with hemp.
Thank you. Our planet cries out, no more fossil fuel. You heard it from the Weed Nuns themselves. 60 species a day going extinct on planet Earth. It really is a fascinating cast of characters at today's event. I have never seen as diverse a group at any protest I've been to. I'll tell you what, I've never seen Weed Nuns at any protest I've been to. We are moving through the crowd here. This says climate change disproportionately affects Black and brown people. Could you guys talk to me about this sign?
I think that we tend to think that environmental justice is somehow separate from all the other types of justice, whether it's racial justice, food justice, and income equality, it's all related. I have a new sign in mind that I want to do that has all of these on it in sort of a crossword puzzle, and it's going to be called Resist with Friends.
Awesome.
Love that. Thank you.
Thank you. And what about you? I see you guys have a lot of colorful signs here today.
I've been lovely. People gifted these to me, and I'm proud to support and hold them informal. Happy to be here.
And you are one of what, thousands, you think? How many people are here today?
I have no idea. Thousands, I think. It's pretty awesome.
Is this your first protest?
I've been to a few other protests, but never in San Francisco. So this is cool. I just moved here, so I'm happy to be able to be here today.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Does it make you feel better about the move, knowing that people in this city do something like this?
Yeah, I think in general this is a really great area for this kind of awareness. So I was just telling her it's great to be at an event like this where you can feel connected to a lot of people who care about these types of issues, because it can be kind of demoralizing to face on your own sometimes. So.
How did you find out about the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March?
A bunch of those subscriptions and emails and communities that I'm a part of. This is kind of big event.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
That says human change, not climate change. And that one says your earth, go vegan. Hey, that's an awesome sign. What does it say? Defend the sacred 890 days since Standing Rock and still rising. Another sign that references the Dakota Access Pipeline. These are awesome. Did you get handed these, or did you make these yourself, or what?
I got them handed to me.
Yeah? Is this your first protest?
Yeah.
Awesome. What got you out here today?
No.
Very cool. Are you from the city of San Francisco?
No.
Where are you from?
Near Sacramento.
Very cool. And behind the young woman, as you can see, the 1,000 grandmothers for future generations. They're chanting, grandmothers say, keep it in the ground, in reference to oil and other fossil fuels. We are walking still up Market on our way to the Civic Center, a 1.5 mile march. It's the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March. And if you're just joining us, I'm Dylan Boucher reporting here for Happs News today. We've talked to a lot of groups. We've talked to engineers, nurses, scientists, kids. We've shot some dogs. We've looked at dogs. A lot of different groups here today. Not all of them human. All of them concerned about our climate, though. Well, that's an awesome sign. Rise for climate. You lost a couple flowers?
Hanging in there.
Very cool.
Dinner tonight with friends. Taking the evening off.
Tomorrow.
I'm having a great time as I move up Market Street on my way to the Civic Center. We're going 1.5 miles. It seems like we are about 0.5, maybe halfway through. Not quite at a mile. It doesn't feel like a mile anyway. Very effortless march unfolding here today. I have not seen a group this diverse or this large, maybe ever. I mean, I think the only protest I could compare this to was the Los Angeles Women's March, which was, larger than President Trump's inaugural crowd, that's for sure. But also, it's almost set the record for largest protest ever, which I believe still is held by the city of Los Angeles. We're going to keep moving along here, finding more creative signs. I have not encountered counter-protesters yet anywhere except arguably in the Periscope comments. And we welcome you. If you have questions and you have comments, or you are a counter-protester, feel free. Comment in the chat river. If it's a question, we'll try to get it answered for you. Now, this is particularly creative. This protest sign is Donald Trump himself wearing a shirt that says the universe is made of protons, neutrons, electrons, and morons. This one, another dig at the president. Defend democracy, impeach Putin's poodle. And the collar shows Trumpy is the poodle.
Well, and that's not.
Now, as I have highlighted here multiple times already, we have various species here, but maybe the most exotic species I've encountered yet is right here. Dinosaurs. Woo! Dinosaurs protesting to be left in the ground. Don't be fossil fuel-ish. Go green. Dig dinosaurs. Don't burn them. Now that might be another first for me. I've been protesting and going to protests for 7 years now, and I don't think I have ever seen dinosaurs. Very clever idea. And the dinosaurs are marching on with the rest of what seems like thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people. Up Market Street in San Francisco on our way to the Civic Center. This banner, large and black and red, it says permission denied. They are part of the cancer resistance. And the cancer resistance group is focused on fracking. And this sign highlights that. Don't frack with our health. Now all this one says is all I want is peace and climate, but on the back, for all of the cinephiles, movie buffs will always have Paris or not. Save the Paris Agreement with an image from Casablanca.
You can't drink oil! Keep it in the soil! You can't drink oil! Keep it in the soil! You can't drink oil! Keep it in the soil! You can't drink oil! Keep it in the soil!
Well, you heard it here. You can't drink oil. Got to keep it in the soil. We're moving right up Market Street here. If you're just joining us, Dylan Boucher with Happs News. We're on Market Street on our way north. It's a 1.5 mile march today. It's called the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice. One of the largest I've ever attended. Maybe par for the course for San Francisco. I'm pretty new here myself. And very festive event here today. People seem unified. A lot of diversity. You've had dinosaurs, dogs, engineers, nurses. Maybe the most diverse crowd I've ever seen at a protest. Yeah, moving right along. Now, as we move up Market Street in the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March, I'll share a little bit about my own involvement here. I'm from Florida originally. I just moved up here to the Bay Area. I'm a video editor full-time. Used to be with the Los Angeles Times and joining the East Bay Times. But as Florida man, anybody who has been watching the news knows Florida has 3 harmful algae blooms unfolding and infesting freshwater and salt waterways down there in my home state right now, the Sunshine State. The water is not blue in Florida. The water is green in the freshwater cyanobacteria waterways that I used to swim in and kayak in, and that are hazardous to people's health now. And that's all unraveling on the state's east coast in the Caloosahatchee River and St. Lucie estuaries and Indian River Lagoon. Now, that's two of the harmful algae blooms. They start in Lake Okeechobee, which is where the state draws a lot of its water, especially South Florida. And the argument down there is that runoff, agricultural runoff from sugar corporations and other industrial and commercial operations along Lake Okeechobee are causing that. As a Floridian, it concerns me. The science may not be settled yet on whether humans are contributing much with their industrial operations. According to one person at the Moat Marine Lab in Sarasota, sugar is only accounting for about 2% of the discharges that are believed to be causing the toxic algae that you might be seeing in your news feeds when you look for news from Florida. On the other coast in Florida, on the west coast, you have a more naturally occurring harmful algae bloom. It's red tide. That's turning the water brown on the west coast. It's costing the state billions in tourism revenue. But besides that, you've got respiratory health at risk. And so people need to be informed, and there needs to be more done. In that state, they're rallying today and to demand action from Governor Rick Scott on these sugar corporations. So as a Floridian who has grown up in the swamp, who has heard promises that we would drain the swamp, I am here today and I am having a ball. And we're moving right along now. Continuing up market. I am from Miami, Florida, and Miami has been relatively unscathed, but I also lived in Fort Lauderdale, which is about 20 miles north, and Fort Lauderdale just this week has started to see in its own fresh waterways some of that blue-green cyanobacteria, which is also hashtagged as toxic algae on Twitter. And if you search toxic algae, you will see the green slime. They call it the guacamole water. It really does look like folks are having fun here. They're having a ball. The Guardians of the Forest is the group we are marching in front of now. Somebody asked in the chat, do I believe in chemtrails? Great question. No, I do not believe in chemtrails. And if you have more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We will find the answers. And over here, flipping the camera, you can see a woman who is literally holding the world in her hands, the whole world in her hands. And we are going to follow that globe. Now there is loudness all around today. We have musicians marching in front of me on Market Street and behind me. We are coming up to a pause in the march. It seems like a brief music break. Only cacti thrive in drought. Eat the rich. Hey, how did you come up with that sign?
I saw a stencil of a cactus, and then I liked it, so I came up with the phrase.
Awesome. What got you out here today?
Sorry?
What got you out here today?
My friend Michelle.
And her sign says, "Stop colonialism, resist."
Your friend entonces? ¿Este organismo? Cool.
And the march, as you can see, is now moving again. This is the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March in San Francisco. And here you have the Central Coast Alliance United for a Sustainable Economy. Luke is asking, what is the subject of this protest? Luke, today's protest is the Rise for Climate, Justice, and Jobs. These protesters are demanding that the state of California divest over $300 million in its two pension funds from coal and fossil fuel corporations. They are also calling for the state of California to ban fracking. So these are environmental advocates seeking very specific policy change. Some of that police presence some of you in the chat river have asked about.
Hey, ho, ho! Corporations have got to go!
Now they are chanting, hey, hey, ho, ho, corporations have got to go.
Corporations have got to go.
Her drum says, fuck patriarchy.
Let's make them hear our sound! Keep it in the ground!
We are moving right along. I am still loaded with energy as it seems thousands of people marching here today are at the Rise for Climate, Justice, and Jobs. Jason in the comments thinks Nike should fix the water. Hopefully Nike will be able to afford to fix the water with all of their new revenue from the outstanding new advertisements starring Colin Kaepernick among other athletes, activist-minded athletes, who you were liable to find in this crowd here today. And if you're just joining us, I'm Dylan Boucher with Happs News. We are in San Francisco at the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March. His shirt says, slow, clean energy. And here's the Alliance of South Asians taking action. And here we have the Filipino American Coalition for Environmental Solidarity. And the National Network for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, also represented here today. One of dozens of groups here at the Rise for Climate Justice and Jobs. And I'm Dylan Boucher here with Happs News today. There are thousands of people out here, hundreds of groups. It is seriously inspiring.
I'm gonna try to bring up this thing. Goes like this. People gonna rise like the water. We're gonna calm this crisis down. I hear the voice of my great granddaughter saying, keep it in the ground. People gonna rise like the water. We're gonna calm this crisis down. I hear the voice of my great granddaughter saying, keep it in the ground. I can hear y'all. People gonna rise like the water. We're gonna calm this crisis down. I hear the voice of my great granddaughter saying, keep it in the ground. The people gonna rise like the water. We're gonna calm this crisis down. I hear the voice of my great granddaughter saying, keep it in the ground. The people gonna rise like the water. We're gonna calm this crisis down. I hear the voice of my great granddaughter saying, keep it in the ground. The people gonna rise like the water. We're gonna calm this crisis down.
And we're back. Dylan Boucher here with Happs News, answering Jason in the chat river, who asked, what is this going to do? If you're just joining us, the emphasis, the focus of today's Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March is to persuade Governor Jerry Brown to support and for the State Assembly and State Senate in California to enact SB 185, a bill to divest $300 million of the two state pension funds that are currently invested in coal and fossil fuel organizations and reinvest that into renewable energy. Jason says they should have a full song. Honestly, a fair criticism. I come to a lot of these protests. They have lots of chants, lots of verses. I'm not sure I've ever heard a complete song in one of these. Jason, why don't you write it? San Francisco, be the lodestar for saving our planet. Hi, could you talk to me about what that means?
A lodestar is, sort of like the North Star that would guide ships. And, sometimes we play on words because the person in the Trump administration just came out and used that word. They're trying to identify him. So I want San Francisco to become the lead for, the world in saving the planet and reducing climate change. Nice. Well, good to see you, my brother. Good to see you.
Banner says time is running out. Stop privatizing the earth. And we are still moving along here on Market Street en route to the Civic Center in San Francisco. One more pause. And Cool Beans has asked, is Soros there? Referencing the Hungarian born billionaire George Soros. Honestly, I have not run into Mr. Soros yet, but if I do, I will be sure to ask him for an interview. Now we are at the intersection of Market and Turk, hopefully closer to the Civic Center now than we are to the plaza where today's march started, Embarcadero. Dozens of organizations, as I've said. Here we have the Chinese Progressive Association marching alongside the Asians who are rising for climate justice and the Asian Pacific Environmental Network. Make fur useful again and keep winter coming. Dogs out here in San Francisco, a city I'm fairly new to, rally for climate, jobs, and justice. And the winter. And their winter coat. Make fur useful again. If you just saw it on that dog, make fur useful again. A sign around a dog's collar. I've not seen that before. My older brother, did the same, something similar once, but not quite as creative a message by putting a sign around his dog at a Occupy protest back in 2011. I think what make fur useful again means is that husky that we saw wearing that sign around its collar really wants the temperature to remain cool That husky is a believer that human actions are contributing to the warming of our planet, and the husky has had enough, and they want their fur coat to be useful again. And if you're just joining us, Dylan Boucher with Happs News here at the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March. Do I think Ben Shapiro for president is a good idea? Jason in the chat river asks. Definitely not. Maybe one of the worst ideas I've seen, at least in the chat river, if not all day. I'm going to turn this. I am not a San Franciscan. I am a Florida man originally. And I've moved up here now to work full time with the East Bay Times. And this is quite an introduction to this city, I must say. These people know how to protest. As somebody who attended protests and marches in South Florida for 6 years, this is unbelievable. Extraordinary, honestly, from my perspective. I'm going to turn this camera back around so you can see some of these Aztec dancers. These are Azteca dancers. The Azteca dancers being led with a sign. The pride flag, a white dove, and planet Earth. Despierta, it reads. Awake. Drew Shepard asks, is this Burning Man or a protest? Could be either. Depends on your perspectives. We are all technically at Burning Man with climate change affecting all species. I did grow up in a politically active family, David asks. Absolutely, yep. Now, my own family, very likely out and about at one of their local Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice marches. My brother, who used to attend Occupy Gainesville, Florida marches when he was a student at the University of Florida, now living in Knoxville, Tennessee. And my dad, a big liberal guy, one who instilled my political beliefs, probably down somewhere near Fort Lauderdale's Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice march, or working in his yard, being a steward of his own and slice of the environment. The Azteca dancers moving along the red strip in the middle of Market Street as we head to the Civic Center in San Francisco. This is a 1.5-mile march today. You can see the Azteca dancers behind me. I'm Dylan Boucher here with Happs News if you're just joining us. It is not hot. It is just cool enough to be walking around outside with a breeze without breaking a sweat. Lovely day to be out marching. Great way to get your exercise. Jason asks once again, why not Ben Shapiro? Is Ben out at a climate march today? I don't know. I have to answer that question with another question. I'd love to know if Ben Shapiro were out at a climate march. My opinion might be different on why not Ben Shapiro for president, Jason, to answer your question. And now, the march finally turning off of Market Street. If you can see, we are turning off of Market Street here onto, and I'm going to point out the volunteers who are helping lead the turn as we move from Market Street onto Jones. We are in front of the Hibernia Bank in San Francisco. Excuse me, it's McAllister. McAllister Street we're on now. Now, as somebody who is pretty new to this city, I have to say this is maybe the most beautiful city I've ever protested in, that's for sure. Yeah, it's not just the weather, it's the architecture and the people. Great energy here today. Jason wants me to look at the famous apartment building on the corner. I am going to turn the camera and point it upward to show instead of tell about this beautiful city that we are marching through today. As you can see, surrounded by historical buildings. As the marchers keep moving up McAllister. And here we are now marching in front of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Group, MMIW. I have seen this group at the March for Our Lives in Los Angeles. I've seen this group at several protests, an issue that is not getting enough attention in the mainstream media. Several women have gone missing in the US and Canada. Alejandro G writes in the chat river, worthless green-haired goblins. To that, Alejandro, I must ask, what is a worthless green-haired goblin to an internet troll in a Periscope chat? This sign reads, poisoned earth, poisoned water, poisoned people, no pipelines. Tell the banks, divest now. In reference to the Dakota Access Pipeline.
Are you serious?
You can see this group struggling to breathe. So nice out. The group honestly struggling to keep up their banner. We rise for survival. And we are still moving up McAllister now, en route to the Civic Center, passing the UC Hastings College of Law. One more sign to highlight: greed equals global warming. Another one planet, one chance. I'd estimate we've walked at least a mile now of this mile-and-a-half march, if not more. We do seem to be getting close to the Civic Center. And on our left, on my left, and behind me now, is the U.S. Federal Building. This sign with this Native American on it, the Cree prophecy that says, when all the trees have been cut down, when all the animals have been hunted, when all the waters are polluted, when all the air is unsafe to breathe, only then will you discover you cannot eat money. This guy's doing double duty today. He's got the Cree prophecy sign and another that says there is no planet B. Could you talk to me about why you put the E and the T in blue?
Well, because it says either Plan B or Planet B.
There is no plan B. One way to read this. There is no planet B. Another way to read this. Very clever. And you can see murals complementing the art on the signs the marchers are carrying.
All right. Okay, relatives. We're coming into Civic Center, so it's going to get a little logistically tricky.
As you can hear, we are
Coming
now
up, we're
near
going
the
to have
Civic
a bunch
Center,
of murals in the streets, so we
the
have to
end
take
point
the
of today's
sidewalks.
march.
I'm going to be real. We have a lot of non-native relatives and allies in our block. This is an indigenous block space. We ask you to respect our protocol moving ahead. When we split, we're asking our indigenous relatives to take to the left sidewalk. Non-indigenous relatives to the right sidewalk. So as you indigenous relatives, when we split up ahead, take to the left sidewalk.
We are now in the Civic Center Historic District. For anybody just joining, Dylan Bauscher with Happs News. nearing the end point of the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March in San Francisco, one of 900 actions in 95 countries taking place today. I'm going to flip this camera back around as these marchers start. Once more.
Together and pick a side, left or right. There's more room on the right.
Indigenous women rise, the sign reads. Jason in the comments adding that China is the problem. The US and China do contribute more than other nations to man-made climate change with industry and with agriculture, which is an incredibly underrated contributor to climate change. Agriculture, according to multiple UN studies, contributes almost as much as greenhouse gas emissions from transportation and industrial organizations. We are still moving up McAllister Street now on the last leg of our tour. And I'm going to turn the camera here. You can see the Civic Center as we are reaching it. I'm going to highlight this large work on the street. It says, "Protect the sacred." And they are still finishing it up. Street art on McAllister Street, right in the center of the intersection. At McAllister and Larkin.
Listen to your grandmother. Keep talking. We want to get everybody through.
You know, for how beautiful the energy, the climate, the people have been here today, I really do wish I could afford to live in this city. I'm going to show you a little bit of what I'm talking about. I'm going to flip this camera over now with an unobstructed view of that Civic Center, which thousands of people are marching toward at the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March in San Francisco. As you can see, we're here at the Civic Center on the front lawn where there are dozens of tents set up for the end of the march to raise awareness for people who have brought their tents, vendors as well, people representing various causes, some of which we've seen as we've walked through the march today. I'm going to walk up now on a circle of flowers.
We're going to be dancing. Also, the young people will be dancing at 1 and at 2. Or
Really?
after 1, yeah. We'll have a whole dance and choreographed.
Okay.
Yeah. Who are you
Awesome.
with?
Happs News.
Oh, nice.
Dylan Boucher.
Cool.
Yeah. And so who are you guys dancing with? Who are you with?
We're Corey. I'm Corey Van Gelder, and we are Dragonfly Youth Movement Coalition.
Okay.
They've created a dance which embodies their relationship to climate change and fighting for climate justice. And we have a drummer and musicians, and we're working on it for a few months now, just for today.
Great. And that starts in 2 minutes here.
Well, we wanted the groups to come in for maybe 15 minutes.
About 15.
Reality, yeah. Reality, 1 o'clock rally time.
And what else should people who are, watching this
Well, there's amazing
know about
street
this?
murals that are happening all the way around the edges from all the different organizations.
So I saw one on camera earlier, and maybe some of the viewers did too, at the intersection over there.
So they're completely around the whole plaza. They've closed off the whole thing. David Solnit has done an incredible job of organizing all of the different climate organizations to each take a section to use either clay-based paint or non-toxic tempera paint and cover the streets. So that's happening. There's also all the information booths happening around there too.
Well, we'll go check that out and come back when the dancers get here then. Thank you. Dylan Boucher here with Happs News. Finally at the Civic Center, the end of our 1.5-mile march today in the city of San Francisco. It's part of the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice March. One of hundreds of actions taking place in 90 countries, over 90 countries today. And according to one news article I saw earlier, they were estimating, it was The Guardian reported, hundreds of thousands of people who were expected around the world to be participating in these events. I wouldn't be surprised if it's millions after seeing the turnout here. San Francisco absolutely knows how to protest. And as that woman with the Dragonfly Network just informed us, some of this art that we are seeing on the street is actually part of several projects at all 4 corners and on all 4 streets around the Civic Center in San Francisco. Here you can see one group just starting on the next circle, the next street art project. This one focused on indigenous people. And there's that Civic Center. This turnout, honestly, what I expected, if not slightly larger. And while these street projects seem like they were started with chalk, they're being colored in not with chalk. Could you talk to me about what you're doing?
Just doing some art, man, to bring attention to some of the signs, some of the emblems, some of the imagery that we have up with our own. This is Indigenous Peoples Project. So for Indigenous people, by Indigenous people, highlighting the importance of spirituality, culture, ceremony, and art, and to make it a common direction for us to go to make things better for everybody.
And the indigenous people who are here today at this march, what's their connection to the environment and the climate?
And I can't speak for all indigenous people, but for myself, I know that we're responsible and we're beholden to the land. It's up to us to make sure that it's here for the next 7 generations. Part of that comes up with us making sure that we're standing up for everybody, not not just our own and not just where we're from, but for the planet. You look at what's going on, how they're mining, how they're just taking from the land without any offering. It's not the way we're supposed to be. We're here just trying to share a little bit about our history, about where we're from, hopefully pass along that message.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're going to move along to another group of chalk artists. And actually, here's regular artists painting the Civic Center. How's it going, sir? You doing this for the Rise for Climate March today?
Yeah, they haven't even finished yet.
Thank you.
Yeah, it looks way better than I was doing.
Me too.
Stick figure. Yeah.
This art focused on the border. Protect the water. And over there it says no borders. Now, with the thousands of people who are continuing their march up McAllister toward the Civic Center you see on screen, you can imagine this street being painted now will very likely be full of people. And that lawn in front of that Civic Center is filling up. This group painting with Outcast as the soundtrack and Run for Salmon as the cause. We'll try to find out more about what that is exactly. Excuse me, what is the Run for Salmon? Okay, thank you. As you can see, the marchers are now indeed filling the street. And volunteers are asking people to step back, and that's what we'll be doing here. Starting with indigenous groups. The street is now filling up.
Go to the right. Go to the right over here. Right. Circle around there. Yeah, we're going to circle up. To the right. Around the statue. Around the open. Circle up. Right here. Right here.
You can see people streaming in with the Civic Center in the background. And there you have it. We have now marched 1.5 miles to the Civic Center where people are gathering for the remaining hours of this march. There will be dancers on the lawn. There are several vendors for people to go and visit. Thousands have marched at the Rise for Climate, Jobs, and Justice here in San Francisco, including myself, Dylan Bauscher, with Happs News. And they made it. We're here. We're at the Civic Center. It's a beautiful day. The breeze is still blowing. It's a great day to be out protesting. And we're going to take a short break here. And we might come back. Thank you for tuning in, guys.
Écoutez, à midi.
Quelle heure est-il?
Il est midi.
C'est l'heure de déjeuner.
Qu'est-ce qu'il y a à manger?
Des saucisses, sans doute.
Écoutez et répétez. À midi. À midi. À midi.
Quelle heure est-il? Quelle heure? Quelle heure est-il? Est-il? Quelle heure est-il?
Il est midi.